Hello and welcome. I'm Pip Tomson and you're watching W News, broadcasting live from the Al Arabiya headquarters. These are our top stories. The President of South Korea faces impeachment as protesters and MPs call for his resignation after he declared martial law. NATO's Secretary-General pledges to improve intelligence collaboration as he promises to get more military aid into Ukraine. And French Prime Minister Michel Barnier fights for his political life as lawmakers vote on whether to trigger an act of no confidence. Our top story, and South Korea's President Yoon Suk Yeol is facing impeachment after a failed attempt at throwing the country into martial law. The move was revoked only hours after Yoon made the decree yesterday. Our Asian correspondent Chris Gilbert sent us this report.
South Korea's President Yoon Suk Yeol faces impeachment following that late Tuesday night local time decree he made of martial law, which was only revoked hours later, but triggered upheaval in South Korea and protests now calling for him to resign, to step down as president of the country. The opposition party, the Democratic Party, has filed a motion of impeachment against Yoon Suk Yeol that is expected to be voted on by Friday or Saturday, but until then, the country has to live with the aftermath of this decree which was made. Yoon Suk Yeol says because he alleges that members of the opposition party were pro-North Korea and therefore destabilizing to the safety and security of his country, South Korea, an argument which Parliament did not buy, blocking the move just hours later, and now Yoon Suk Yeol is facing impeachment, which if that happens, he could be stripped of his presidential authority at least until a constitutional court decides his fate. But whether or not he is impeached remains uncertain. The motions of impeachment require 2/3 of Parliament to be successful. At the moment, the main opposition party has a majority, but only about half, about 56%, meaning they need to look to members of Yoon Suk Yeol's own People Power Party to make it successful, which, while that may be difficult, may certainly not be impossible, considering the PPP's own leader, Han Dong-moon, said that he wants to see those behind this decree of martial law held accountable. Now, there have already been resignations that of the chief cabinet secretary and other secretaries inside the PPP, but protesters are calling for more. They want to see the defense minister resign, and of course they want to see the president, Yoon Suk Yeol, step down as well. And experts believe that these calls may only grow and the protests may only grow as long as the status quo continues, and they believe that the move by Yoon Suk Yeol was definitely a political mistake and potentially an egregious overstep.
Chris Gilbert in Tokyo, thank you. Well, let's delve into this a little bit more with the former British Defence and Middle East Minister, Tobias Ellwood. Really good to see you, Tobias, on W News. Thousands of people in South Korea taking part in a candlelit vigil this evening. It really has rocked South Korea. What was your reaction when you saw events unfolding last night? The imposition of the martial law, the protests that followed, and then that U-turn just hours later.
Quite incredible. I mean, how often do we speak about different corners of the world in trouble, conflicts flaring up? It's become so frequent. We've almost become desensitized to it. It's on our TV screens every day. And yet suddenly this was South Korea calling for martial law. My immediate reaction was, what has North Korea done? What has Kim Jong-un instructed his armed forces to do? Has he sent a missile in? Has he crossed the border? Nothing. This was actually all about a president just trying to prop up his own situation. And this is the worrying thing. This is a democratic state, an ally of the West, suddenly calling for martial law. And that perhaps is the concern, is that we're seeing a demise in democracy across the world. And now a president choosing to press that emergency button to call in the military and to call in martial law just to protect, his own future. Quite shocking indeed. I think my concern now, going back to North Korea, is what might they do during this turmoil that you've just been describing, as he's now going to be impeached. Who is leading South Korea at the time? Will North Korea take advantage of the confusion that's now taking place.
And even the United States, one of South Korea's biggest allies, was caught off guard here. So what should Western nations be learning from all this?
Well, firstly, we need to think about South Korea itself, a country that we assume, because that's the way it's been, that this is a peaceful democracy, a high-tech country, a rich country now. But of course, the older generation in South Korea will remember the authoritarian state, the military rule from before. The younger generation, interestingly, have never been exposed to this. And it was them, the youngsters, that went up to those with the guns, pushing the guns back, saying, this is not who we are. But you're right to call out America and America's concerns here, because, of course, they've got 30,000 troops that are on that buffer zone between North and South Korea. Very concerned indeed as to where this might go. We want stability, there's no doubt about it. And they've got rid of a president in the recent past, and presume that they'll go through the similar motions now as well. But it is worrying, as I say, when there's global disorder is spreading across the world, that we see a democracy that we see perhaps as a pillar of strength in the Asia area, suddenly toying with the idea that martial law might be the future.
How can South Korea recover from this? I mean, the president, it looks like he will be impeached. How do they go forward? Because, as I said, this has really rocked the country.
It has indeed. As I say, they've been around this buoy a little bit in the past, having to get rid of a previous corrupt president. This one was, I understand, a lame duck leader. He was lost the last general election. That's parliamentary-wise, didn't have the numbers in Parliament to get his legislation through. But I'm pleased in a way that it's ended so peacefully and so quickly. But as I say, worrying that in today's day and age, that a president could even think of calling in the military, seeing helicopters, dropping their troops, abseiling off, onto the roof of the assembly is quite shocking. And I hope that the younger generation will confirm and say, absolutely, this is not what South Korea is all about. We are a peaceful nation. We're a democratically embracing nation. Let's get a new president in as soon as possible, and fresh elections as well. That's what that needs to happen. Mindful of the fact, as I say, that there are adversaries and competitors in the region that wish ill of South Korea and may choose to take advantage of this.
Whilst I've got you, Tobias, you are a former minister for the Middle East. I just wanted to ask you about Syria as well. What did you make of the opposition armed group's successes against the Syrian army in recent days? I understand now that they are on the outskirts of Hama and there are fierce battles taking place.
Yes, this is quite surprising as well. Hyer Tahrir al-Sham, HTS, this is a breakaway affiliate of al-Qaeda that's been in the north of Syria for some time. And it took 4 years for the Syrian armed forces, for Assad to take Aleppo. And now this militia has taken it back in just 4 days as well. The timing of it, I think, is very critical indeed, because what props up Assad and his government is absolutely Iran, is Hezbollah, and of course Russia. And in all three cases, those entities are hugely distracted. And I don't think they're going to be able to come to Assad's aid in the same way as they've done before. Plus the fact that, again, just reading from what I understand, this terrorist group, as they are, actually wants longevity. They don't want to create a caliphate as such, as we saw in the past. They simply want to be an alternative to the Assad regime. And for the people in Syria, there isn't much alternative. And that is the struggle that we have there. But
so that presents a quandary, Tobias, for Western governments, doesn't it? Because should they support President Assad or should they support the opposition?
Yeah, well, it's more complicated than that because, of course, you've got the Kurdish groups as well, the Syrian Democratic Forces. There are an awful lot of groupings there with proxy support from outside the country as well. But I am reminded, and you mentioned the West, how we gave up on this particular part of the world. I was in Parliament at the time. I remember the vote in August 2013, where we voted to basically extract ourselves, handing the space over to Russia completely. So they were then in control of the destiny of Syria, because of course Syria, Assad was struggling after the revolutions that took place after the Arab Spring, was holding on by the skin of his teeth and then bailed out by Russia. So who knows where this was going? Unfortunately, it's the gateway for a lot of the drugs, for a lot of the corruption, a lot of the weapon systems that they gets into Lebanon as well. But I'm afraid it comes at another time when the world is distracted, when there are so many red lights flashing on the global order dashboard for the West to contend with right now.
It's great to have your insight. Thank you so much. Former British Defence and Middle East Minister Tobias Ellwood.
Thank you.
To Brussels now, and NATO has pledged to boost intelligence collaboration in an effort to curb acts of sabotage by China and Russia. This comes as a two-day meeting of alliance foreign ministers has wrapped up in Brussels. NATO's chief says discussions on continued support for Ukraine were very productive in what was the last gathering of its kind before Donald Trump assumes the US presidency. William Denselow reports from the Belgian capital.
Addressing the media here at NATO headquarters, Mark Rutte, the military alliance's Secretary General, said that members must do more for Ukraine than just help them stay in the fight against Russia. He said that they must help them change the trajectory when that comes to providing more military support, defensive capabilities or more troop training. This comes as Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has suggested that the only way that Ukraine can achieve a lasting peace is with full NATO membership. On that issue, Mark Rutte says that he believes that Ukraine's future does indeed lie with the military alliance, but says the priority for right now is ensuring that when Kyiv is ready to negotiate with Moscow, it does so from a position of strength. Plenty of focus that has really hung over this meeting of foreign ministers over the past 2 days has been of the Donald Trump presidency that begins in earnest on January 20th in the US, and what Donald Trump's stance on Ukraine exactly will be. On that issue, we've heard from outgoing US Secretary of State Antony Blinken says that now is the time for NATO members to lean in, not lean out when it comes to Ukraine. We've also heard from Mark Rutte praising Donald Trump during his first term in office, saying that Donald Trump helped push NATO allies towards spending more on defence. Mark Rutte says more defence spending is certainly needed in the future. He also had somewhat of a warning for the United States, especially when it comes to other countries allegedly helping Russia in its war in Ukraine to varying degrees, citing the likes of China, Iran and North Korea. On North Korea, he said that it was he said not to be naive to the fact that Russia could be providing potentially missile technology that could in turn directly pose a threat to the United States. On the issue of Iran, Mark Rutte said that in return for Iran providing drones to Russia, Russia was providing Tehran with more finances, which he says were being used to fund its proxies in the region. Rutte says that is a further example of how the war in Ukraine is becoming ever more interwoven, ever more interconnected with crises, other conflicts around the world.
William Denselow in Brussels there. Right, let's take you through some other stories making the headlines today. Israeli tanks moved into parts of the Khan Yunis area of the Gaza Strip earlier, whilst Palestinian medics say Israeli airstrikes have killed at least 20 people in the area. Families have left their homes nearby and headed towards humanitarian zones in Al-Muassi. A manhunt is underway in New York after a top health insurance executive was shot dead in Manhattan earlier today. 50-year-old Brian Thompson was shot in the chest outside the Hilton Hotel in Midtown Manhattan. It's believed to be a targeted attack. The former Deputy Chief Minister of Punjab, Sukhbir Singh Badal, has survived an attempted assassination at the Golden Temple in the Indian city of Amritsar. A gunman opened fire at the Indian politician at one of the holiest shrines in the Sikh faith earlier today. He's been arrested by police. Sean Diddy Coombs is facing a new lawsuit after being accused of dangling a woman from a 17th floor apartment balcony. The fashion designer Brianna Bongolan alleges the incident took place in 2016 at the home of Diddy's former girlfriend Cassandra Ventura. The musician is currently in federal custody awaiting trial on charges of racketeering and sex trafficking. He denies all the allegations. The mother of rapper Eminem has died at the age of 69. Debbie Nelson, who was often referenced in the rap star's songs, had been battling lung cancer. Many of the musician's lyrics highlighted the mother and son's strained relationship. To France now, and Prime Minister Michel Barnier is awaiting the results of a vote which could potentially topple his government. Opposition lawmakers from the left and right will decide whether or not to trigger a vote of no confidence after Barnier forced through a draft budget without parliamentary approval. We can go live to our correspondent Ross Cullen, who is in Paris. Ross, hello to you. It is a huge day in French politics. Tell us how we expect this vote to be played out.
Yeah, hi Pip. Voting getting underway very shortly, and unless there is something dramatic changing in the voting intentions, it's very likely that this will pass and Michel Barnier will be ousted as Prime Minister because he leads a minority government, and when you add in the votes of the opposition left, the far left and the far right, they have more than enough votes to get this over the line and force Michel Barnier to resign and force the French government to collapse for only the first time since 1962. This doesn't happen very often at all, that the opposition have enough votes to be able to bring down a government, but it's likely to happen this evening.
So who could replace Barnier if lawmakers vote against him?
Well, there are several options open to the president because that's what will happen if he is voted out. He will submit a letter of resignation to Emmanuel Macron, and then it is up to President Macron to decide what happens next. He could ask Michel Barnier to be reappointed, to stay in place and try to build some form of majority around the 2025 budget, which is the crux of all of this. The opposition's opposition to the 2025 budget proposed by the government. And the other option for Emmanuel Macron is to try to appoint somebody else. Now, remember, Pip, that over the summer it took weeks and weeks following the inconclusive election in July for Emmanuel Macron eventually to settle on Michel Barnier to lead a minority government. But time is of the essence. Time is not on Emmanuel Macron's side. He needs to have a prime minister in place as soon as possible to get to work back on that budget to try to build a majority, because the 2025 budget must be approved before we get there, so before the 1st of January, and there's only a few weeks left in December.
One of Barnier's fiercest critics, Ross, has been the right-wing leader Marine Le Pen. I think she has been speaking in the last few minutes. Now, she's interesting, isn't she? Because it's being suggested that she could be acting in her own personal interests rather than in the interests of the country.
Well, Laurent Wauquier's, Pip, he's the leader of the moderate Republicans from which Michel Barnier comes, and he was speaking in the last hour in Parliament after Marine Le Pen, and he spent most of the time at the lectern directing his speech towards the far-right leader, saying that she'd always ruled out, she said she would never work with the left wing, never work with the far right, with the far left, and that's exactly what she's doing this evening by voting for the far left motion to oust Michel Barnier. When she was speaking before Mr. Wauquier's, Marine Le Pen said that this is the end of the optical illusion of this ephemeral government. That's how she described Michel Barnier's time in office, saying that the budget he proposed, quote, took the French people hostage. So she is certainly one of the key players in this, because although she's not in government, she does lead the biggest party in Parliament. Her National Rally party have more lawmakers than any other force in the National Assembly.
Lots of talk too about the future of President Macron with a political crisis of this magnitude. I mean, could it bring him down? He's in Saudi Arabia this week. What's he said?
Yeah, and President Macron is due back in about an hour's time or so here in France from Saudi Arabia at the end of his diary booked-in state visit to Saudi Arabia, where he was doing deals and meeting Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince. He is back in time for the results of the vote, in time to see whether his Prime Minister has survived or not. Many people in the opposition ranks have been calling for Emmanuel Macron to step aside, saying that he will be able to unblock all of this chaos if he resigns. Emmanuel Macron says those calls for him to step down are political fiction. He says that he was voted in a presidential election in 2022 by the public to serve a 5-year mandate, and that's exactly what he will do, serve out his 5-year term to 2027. He says that the people put their faith in me, I must there repay their faith. The calls for me to step down are nothing but a fiction. So that's the position as far as Emmanuel Macron is concerned. As far as Michel Barnier is concerned, we'll have to wait not much longer now, about an hour and a half or so, to find out whether he is going to remain as France's Prime Minister or not.
A crucial day in France. Ross Cullen, thank you so much for bringing us right up to date. Returning to today's NATO meeting, and as foreign ministers meet in Brussels, many members, particularly Baltic states, are waiting for Donald Trump to re-enter the White House before making a crucial decision over whether Ukraine will be allowed to join the defence alliance. The US president-elect has been critical of American aid sent to Ukraine and has vowed to end the war in a single day, but without specifying how. Benji Hyer reports.
Top diplomats from NATO countries gathering in Europe's political capital to discuss Ukraine. But the real political capital when it comes to the war-torn nation lies with a man several thousand kilometers away, the next US president.
He is arriving at a time where we are very united in supporting Ukraine. And so looking forward to having conversations with the future Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, on this very issue. But I think also that it is up to us to make sure, as strong allies and as supporters of Ukraine, to talk about how much what is happening in Ukraine is fundamental not only to European security, but to North Atlantic security and to the world.
Donald Trump will need some convincing. No wonder NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte flew out to meet him after his election victory. Trump and his team have been vocal skeptics of sending more funding to Ukraine, having campaigned on a pledge to resolve the conflict, although that could mean pressuring Ukraine into a deal that sees it lose some of its sovereign territory. And Trump's pick for US ambassador to NATO, Matthew Whitaker, is someone he says will, quote, put America first. It's music to Russia's ears.
Even if we're to lay one side the prediction that Donald Trump will cut assistance to Ukraine, which for the Ukrainian army would essentially be a death sentence, it's becoming clearer that he and his team will, in any case, conduct an audit of the assistance provided to Kyiv.
It's why outgoing President Joe Biden is hurriedly taking steps to boost backing to Ukraine in coming months. Just this week, his White House announced a $725 million military aid package, in part to bolster the country's defences and give it a more favourable hand in advance of a Trump term. Back in Brussels, NATO says Ukraine will join its ranks and its path to membership is irreversible, though the alliance has yet to issue a formal invitation. It may be all smiles for now, but the last laugh might come from across the Atlantic, the new US administration providing a potential test for how strong this bond really is. Benji Hyer, Al Arabiya News, Washington.
Bringing you the top business news stories now, and Abu Dhabi, which holds more than 90% of the UAE's oil reserves, has today announced a centralised business registry authority as it diversifies its economy away from oil. The city emirate has plans to move into the tourism, logistics and manufacturing sectors as it seeks future financial growth without the use of fossil fuels. Volkswagen in Germany could face further strikes as the car maker's CEO battled with the company's Labour boss during a staff meeting today. VW chief executive Oliver Blume warned major cuts were necessary for the manufacturer to respond to Chinese competition. More talks are scheduled for next Monday. 3 of the UK's private rail companies, South West Rail, C2C and Greater Anglia, will become nationalised by next year. The British government believes it will save £150 million investing the money into services rather than the pockets of shareholders. Looking at the sports news, and Novak Djokovic will take part in the Brisbane International on the 29th of December before attempting his 25th Grand Slam at the Melbourne Open next month. The Serbian champion, who recently announced former rival Andy Murray as his new coach, says he's looking forward to being back in Australia. And Tiger Woods believes every American golfer taking part in the Ryder Cup should receive $5 million each to take part, with every cent of that going to charity. Traditionally, players were not paid to compete in the competition, but next year, 12 US players will earn $400,000 each. Tiger Woods says he's never wanted to get paid to play, and the money would be better served elsewhere. Sticking with sport, though, now, and a centuries-old pursuit is still being practiced in cities, towns and villages in India. The ancient form of wrestling, a game played in lots of mud, can be tracked back 2,500 years. As Neha Punia reports, despite modern wrestling having become more popular in India, it's the traditional form of the game that keeps bringing players to the mat.
It's one of the world's oldest sports. A game of agility and speed. Wrestling, or kushti as it's called here, is a way of life for these young athletes. And this akhada, or traditional gym on the outskirts of Delhi, has been shaping bodies and fortunes for more than 6 decades.
Only someone with discipline and respect for the game can become a wrestler.
25-year-old Shamshad is a national champion and is training to represent India at the next Olympics. He says there's no better way to train and build stamina.
Mud wrestling matches can go on for 15 to 20 minutes. Professional wrestling matches last 6 minutes only when played on the mat. This isn't like going to the gym where you take supplements. This sport needs an all-natural diet and lots of exercise.
Wrestlers who live and train here also have to stay celibate, eat a vegetarian diet rich in dairy and nuts. For generations, this was considered the best way to stay fit.
You could say this sport defines India, just like yoga does. This sport can transform your life. It brings discipline and strength, mental and physical. It's not just a sport, it's a way of life.
In over 2,000 years, not much has changed in how the sport is practiced, except for the name. In ancient times, this was called Malayuddha, or hand-to-hand combat, and today is better known as kushti, or indigenous wrestling. The rules are simple. Opponents cannot punch or kick, and to win, a player needs to get his opponent to hit the mud in this pit or akhada and keep him down. But even today, when the sport has become modern, competitive and has put India on the world map, it's here at traditional mud gymnasiums that nearly all athletes are introduced to wrestling. They say it's a way to stay connected to their roots. To reach new heights of success, indigenous wrestlers start young, like 13-year-old Mohak, who has been training for nearly half his life now, and carries the weight of a sport that has been in his family for 5 generations.
I wake up at 4 a.m. and run here to train. I come back again in the evening for a second round of training.
But at this traditional gym, like in several others in India, practicing on the mat is also given equal priority, as athletes train for competitive international and national events. At the Olympics, wrestling has been India's second most successful sport. And by earning their stripes in the mud, these athletes say landing on their feet is easy. Neha Punia, Al Arabia News, New Delhi.
Let's bring you right up to date with our top stories. The President of South Korea faces impeachment as protesters and MPs call for his resignation after declaring martial law. NATO's Secretary-General pledges to improve intelligence collaboration as he promises to get more military aid into Ukraine. And French Prime Minister Michel Barnier fights for his political life as lawmakers vote on whether to trigger an act of no confidence. That's all from us on W News. Thank you for your company. Riz Khan follows me next, and don't miss Tom Burgess-Watson with GNT. From all of us here, a very good night.